right, well, again, thank you, Joshua, for joining us today for the Journalism Speaker Series. And what we're going to talk to you a little bit about is your career. You've had a very decorated career. You've been at the Panther Now at FIU, Miami-Dade Times, WLRN. But people see the finished product, right? They see you, they hear you, but they don't understand the struggles and the things that you went through to get here, right? Talk to us a little about your journey at FIU and Panther Now, which was the start for you, right?
Yeah, so I went to FIU as an English major, and when I first started college, I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer because that's what my parents wanted me to do and what I thought was a good career. And then I quickly realized this is not what I want to do at all. I absolutely don't want to be a lawyer. So I was looking for other things that could fit my skill set. I knew I was good at writing, so what could I do with that wasn't just being an English teacher? And then I saw the student newspaper as I was walking around FIU. It was called the Beacon at that time, and then it changed to Panther Now. And I thought, oh, this might be fun. I did newspaper stuff in like middle school. Maybe I'll like it. And I kind of fell in love with that. I had to kind of go to the office a lot of times for them because they were very busy for them to interview me. But I started, and I found that I really liked meeting new people all the time, interviewing people, writing for a living because it's what I enjoy. But it took a lot of years at FIU and at the student newspaper to feel like I could actually do this. Because even as I was working at the student newspaper and moving up, I became the news director, so I was in charge of the news section. Even then, in my senior year of college, I didn't think that I could be a real journalist, a real professional journalist. And it wasn't until I got an internship with Miami-Dade Times that I felt, oh, maybe I can do this. And that was when the editor-in-chief called me personally and said, hey, I've read all your stuff that you've done at the college newspaper at FIU. It's really good. I want you to intern for Miami-Dade Times. And that was sort of the beginning where I was like, okay, I'm not just a whoever. I could actually be a journalist.
So talk to me a little bit about, if we can go back a little bit to FIU, right? Mm-hmm. What are some of the struggles you went through? Because you said, that's something you learned to love, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm sure at the beginning you questioned yourself. Yeah. And talk to me a little bit about some of the obstacles that you faced as a student reporter, or even just as a student at FIU, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard being a young person and thinking, nobody wants to talk to you, or, I don't, what do I know? Why should I be allowed to speak to, the president of the university or the chief financial officer of the university? I'm just like an 18, 19-year-old kid. And so that was the tough part, realizing like I am allowed to speak to people. I am allowed to ask them questions and ask them hard questions that are important to our readers. But I would get really nervous about interviewing, an executive at the university or even a professor. And I kind of used this line from a movie I watched called We Bought a Zoo, where it's the line is all it takes is 10 seconds of ridiculous courage. So 10 seconds, I don't think, I just walk in, I'm like, hey, I need to talk to you about this. And then they're like, okay, yeah, let's sit and talk. And so just those 10 seconds of shutting my brain off taught me like, oh, this is fine. And also I think it's a matter of realizing what I'm asking about is important for other people like me, other students, and people deserve to know. And if I can be the person to transmit that information, then I will be that person. So to be honest, I still get nervous. Interviewing people, I still get nervous going to city commission meetings, but I just take those 10 seconds of courage.
You talked about falling in love with it, and I keep going back to that, but journalism is not an easy business, right? You get a lot of doors slammed in your face, you get a lot of rejection. Talk to me a little bit about the mental health part of it. How do you deal with that? What do you do to disconnect?
So yeah, I mean, journalism, in the extreme cases, you're covering things that are very terrible, like shootings or horrible things that are going on. But even on a day-to-day, you're talking about people who are going through hard times. You're talking about people who are at lower income and are just struggling every day. So it's hard to kind of face that every single day. What do I do to disconnect? I like to go for walks. I play a lot of video games, I'll be honest. And so I get home and I try and turn off my phone once I'm off the clock. Sometimes journalists have to work very late. I'm fortunate enough that for the most part I can separate my day. But I'll go home and I'll pet my cat, I'll go for a walk, I'll listen to some birds, and just not think about everything else going on so that the next morning I can turn on and go about my day and go about my work. But I think there needs to be a serious separation. And also, mental health is extremely important. And so I am absolutely advocate for therapy and things like that.
What was that change for you? Because you talked about not being confident at the beginning, right? At what point, and maybe there's a story or maybe there's a series of stories that you did that said, hey, I can do this. This is something it's a viable career, and I'm good at this.
To be honest, so I'm sure some people have heard about imposter syndrome, where you don't feel like, even if you're in a job, you don't feel like you deserve to be in that place. I still feel that today. I feel that all the time. But I think there were certain times where I realized, like, oh, this was really good. So when I was an intern at Miami New Times, I did a story about a lawsuit against Royal Caribbean that ended up being our most read story for that year. And I was like, okay. Then when I worked for Miami New Times as a full-time reporter, I was covering the City of Miami Commission, and I started to gain a reputation where people were calling me and they're like, hey, I've heard of you, I've heard of the work that you do, you're a really good reporter, I need you to look into this story. And now we're at a point where I'm at WLRN, I'm an investigative reporter on the investigations team, and I cover local government. And when they recruited me for WLRN after 2 years at Miami New Times, they said, we're so excited to have you. Like, we're really beefing up our team by hiring Joshua Ceballos. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's ridiculous. But I think the biggest icing on the cake was our recent investigation, or it's not recent anymore, 2 years ago, Unguarded, which was about the Guardianship program of Miami-Dade County, and that went on to win an Investigative Reporters and Editors Award, which is a national award. And so I got to go to California and receive that, and that was really nice.
Talk to us a little bit about that. Give us a little bit more detail about the work that went. How long was this investigation, and what exactly was the investigation about?
So the investigation took about 5 months from start to finish, 4 or 5 months, and it involved the Guardianship program of Miami-Dade County, which is it's a publicly funded institution that is supposed to care for people who are older or mentally ill, who have no one to take care of them. They have no family members, no friends who can make decisions for them, and they can't make decisions for themselves because of whatever mental impairment. So this program steps in and takes care of them. And what we found was that the program was selling off the properties of several of these people and selling them for very cheap to the same people over and over, who would then resell those properties sometimes in the same day for really high profits. So we realized, okay, this program is not doing the best to care for the people that they're supposed to care for, the most vulnerable people in our society. And after our reporting, it took a while, but the county actually investigated the program and found that there were serious issues where they were not keeping track of how they were doing their sales, and they had to change that if they wanted to continue to be funded.
So when you do a project like that, I'm sure, I talk a lot about muscle memory, right? So you do a project like that, I'm sure you had doubts at some points. You're like, are we getting anywhere? So a lot of times I tell our students, like, remember that time you thought you couldn't, do X, Y, Z, and you did it. So talk to us a little bit about using that knowledge that you have now from previous stories and saying, hey, I can do this, or there's something new that I can look into. I'm sure story ideas have come because of that story. People saw it. I know you guys won a Knight Foundation Award as well. And I'm sure a lot of people have reached out to you and say, hey, Joshua would want to know about this.
Yeah, so I heard a journalist say this once, that an investigation, a large project, is like a house that you're building. And you can't build a house, from the top to bottom. You have to build it brick by brick. So that's your reporting, that's your everyday reporting, just doing your daily stuff. I'm talking about local government, talking about people with issues, people who have needs, and building those bricks little by little. And as you build those up, people start to recognize you, and then they start to call you and give you tips. The best stories come from people who have knowledge about this, and they say, hey, I know this is going on. I know that you're the person to do this, and I want you to investigate the story. Now, that like you said, sometimes you have doubts. Halfway through an investigation, we've been working months on it, and we can think, okay, maybe this isn't something. Maybe I don't know if this is really a story that's important, or if what we think is happening is really happening. But I think it's a matter of continuing to do it every day. You're making calls, you're doing interviews, you're reading documents, you're going through court filings, and in your heart, like, there's something here, there's something here. And then you bring it to people, like you bring it to your editors, and you do a gut check. I always have to do a gut check. My editors are probably tired of me calling them, but I'm like, hey, is this a story? And they're like, yes, absolutely, keep going, and you keep going. And I think when we brought it to an attorney, because when you do a big investigation, you have to have a legal review to make sure that your story is airtight and you don't get sued, because you can easily get sued as a journalist. And when the attorney looked at it and said, this is a serious situation, we knew, we were confident, we got it. But that was, that was 3-4 months in.
How'd you find out about that story and say, hey, this is something we should look into?
It was a tip. So yeah, it was a tip. I had just recently started at WLRN, and someone called us, called Danny Rivero, my reporting partner, and said, hey, I think this is going on, and I think you should look at it. Danny called me and said, hey, let's look into this together. And we started digging, and we started looking through documents and going through government meetings, because it had an involvement of a local government figure, and so we were watching this, and that's how that began.
So for someone who's interested in journalism, a young person, or even someone older, what kind of advice would you give them? Because a lot of times people hear negativity as far as journalism as a career. There's no future in it. Can you talk to us a little bit about what advice you would give, and also what is your day-to-day like? I know it can be boring some days, and some days are pretty exciting, right? And it could be days where nothing happens and 10 million things happen the next day. So walk us through a normal day, not a normal day, but an average day, I guess, of your life.
So I'll start with the first part of that question. Yeah, I mean, me going through college, I was just telling someone about this. As I was doing journalism and thinking about doing journalism, every year someone was like, journalism's dying. Journalism's dead. You're not going to have a job when you get out of college. You're not going to get paid a lot of money. Get out of this. And I just, hearing that all the time, I was like, oh, geez, should I really be doing this? Am I an idiot for going for this? But I felt in my heart like this is what I'm called to do, so I kept going. And so far so good. I mean, I have a job. I'm 5-6 years into my professional career, and I think my advice would be for anyone who's thinking about doing this, is really think about, like, if this is something you want to do because you love it. If you want to do it because of the money or the fame, don't do it. There is not a whole lot of money in it, and fame may or may not happen. But that shouldn't be what's driving you to do this job. If you want to do it, it's because you care about your community, you care about people and talking about their plights and helping people, and you love writing. If you love those things, then I think you can keep going and keep driving forward, and someone will recognize you, someone will notice you, and you will be employed, I think. You never know what's going to happen in the future. I always have backup plans, but so far this is what I enjoy doing, and I'm going to keep doing it while I can. As for the second part of your question about an average day, yeah, I think people have a lot of misconceptions. I hate watching a movie where a reporter character comes out and they're like, I have a scoop. I'm gonna bring down the government. That's not at all what's normal. Maybe that'll happen, but I think on a normal day, I'm coming into the office and I'm reading the newspaper, I'm reading different news outlets and seeing what's going on that day and what I can cover. I'm reading government agendas because I cover local government, so I see what's coming up at the next meeting and trying to figure out what's the most important. I start writing notes about what's the most important things I should be looking at. And if I have a story, I'm making a lot of phone calls, making a whole lot of phone calls to people that may or may not answer me and saying, hey, I'm a reporter with WLRN, this is what's happening, do you want to talk about it? And then they'll talk to me, and I'll record the interview, I'll write notes about the interview, and I'm writing up stories for a radio station, or I'm writing up stories for our website, and as a radio reporter, I have to edit audio as well. So I'm recording audio and cutting that up and producing a package.
What kind of skills do you need to work, specifically at WLRN, but just in general as a journalist? If you were building the prototype journalist, what would you do?
The prototype.
You're building Frankenstein, I guess.
The Frankenstein prototypical journalist, I think, someone who's a good communicator, who feels comfortable talking to people, feels comfortable asking questions. A lot of people have an ego. I think you shouldn't have an ego because it's important to recognize, like, I don't necessarily know what I'm talking about, but going to the person that does know what they're talking about and allowing them to explain it to you. A good journalist doesn't have to be an amazing, like the greatest writer of all time, but has to be okay with doing that writing every single day and working at it. I think also being willing to read through documents, not getting bored, someone who's very curious, always wants to know more, is interested in like what's going on and how to explain what's going on. And if you wanted to work at WLRN, I went in there without any kind of radio experience, any kind of audio technical experience, and they taught me that. But I think it's just a willingness to learn, a curiosity, and a certain amount of courage to be able to go out into situations that other people might be too nervous to do.
So talk a little bit about that. You went into this business without, WLRN specifically, without the technical part of it, right? We have a student here, I think Nicole's here somewhere, right, Nicole? So she's interested in maybe someday working at WLRN, but she's afraid. She's like, I know how to write, I know how to interview people, but I've never done anything with radio. So talk to us a little bit about that. So someone who might be overwhelmed thinking like, this is too much for me to learn.
Well, Nicole and anyone else out there, I would say I went in with absolutely zero audio experience. I listened to WLRN 91.3 FM, but I had never done any kind of audio editing. I wasn't into music production or anything like that. And they taught me. I mean, I went in, they said that's not a problem. They gave me all the equipment, they taught me. And I will admit, for my first 2 months where I was training and learning all this stuff, I thought to myself, what the heck did I get myself into? I've never done this before. This is so much that I have to learn. And now I'm over 2 years into the job, and it's day to day. It's not a problem. It's very easy. And I think it's also very rich to be doing radio storytelling, because it's like you're having a conversation, like we're having a conversation with someone. And when someone hears that, I think they connect a lot more. It's not just a character on a piece of paper, but this is a real person who lives in your community, and you're hearing their voice tell their story. And I think that's way more powerful.
So talk to me a little bit about finding your stories, right? So it's a struggle we have here, particularly young people, right? You guys are on your phone, you DM each other all the time. There's not a lot of face-to-face interaction. Talk to us about the importance of talking to people in person, and how do you find these stories that give us a couple of stories of how you found some of your stories.
Yeah, so I think growing up, I was the kind of person that if my friend got the wrong order at a restaurant, I would be the one to complain, like, hey, he ordered no pickles, or, that kind of person. And so I never had a problem with talking to people, with communicating with people. But you still get nervous. I think even today, we are more connected than ever, but also more disconnected than ever. I think you can't be afraid to get someone on the phone. Sometimes I will DM somebody on Instagram if I see they're posting something that I think is worth covering. I'll send them a DM and say, hey, I saw you posted this. I'd like to know more. Here's my phone number, or can I call you? And then getting on the phone with someone and being like, hey, I'm a real person. I'm not a bot. I want to talk to you. Or if you can meet them in person, even better, because then they're seeing you face to face. And I think that humanity is the most important thing. I joked, but during COVID, I started working during COVID, and when we were doing Zoom calls exclusively, I would talk about my cat first, or I would talk about, the laundry machine is too loud, I can't hear you on the Zoom, because that makes you feel more relatable. And when you're interviewing people, you want to look for ways to relate to them so that they let their guard down, so they realize we're just two people having a conversation. And in terms of stories and finding stories, I dig a lot through court filings and lawsuits and agendas. I remember one story, I believe there was a lawsuit against a woman that I found in the court docket who ran like a commune out of her backyard. This woman lived in a tree house in North Miami, and she had like a hippie commune with people living in tents in her backyard, and they were working, they would work on her land and like work for her business, and someone was suing her for trying to evict them. And so I interviewed that I called the person through the filings. I found their number. I called them, and they told me the whole story. And then I visited this commune and visited this woman, and sure enough, like it was a whole, bunch of tents in this big backyard and a big tree house, and all these interesting people who were there and talking to this woman about, sort of this battle she was having with her so-called tenants. And that always stuck with me. I thought that was the most funny story. But other funny stories, I mean, what's interesting is covering local government and covering people who have power in the city government or in the county government, and hearing things from people about things they might be doing wrong, and then going to that person's house or going to the meeting and saying, hey, someone has said that you've done this. Can you tell me about that? Can you comment? And it gets to a point where you have a reputation. And I remember I went to I'm not going to name names, but I went to a local community meeting where a local elected official was hosting it, and I sat in the back, and this person singled me out, like, oh, if that isn't Joshua Ceballos from Miami New Times, oh, how are you gonna grace us today? What are you gonna ask me today? So that was kind of like, hey man, I'm just doing my job, you know. So those kinds of stories they can be funny, they can be a little nerve-wracking, but I think it's fun. I get to do something different every single day, and that's what I really love about my job.
Something different every day, right? So talk to us, journalism. I think in general, in newsrooms, there's a collection of characters, right? But also the people that you have to interview and the people that you write about. So talk to me about some of the characters that you have met, some of the most interesting people you've met doing your job.
I would say some of my colleagues are very, very interesting, very intelligent people. My reporting partner, Danny Rivero, super intelligent guy, super curious. I always joke that, you know, if he's bored, he's not watching TV, he's digging through government documents. He's going through, he's like, oh, last night I was bored, so I started going through this database of every grant that the government has ever given this particular program, and I'm going to write a story about it. I think I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous of that ability to be so curious about things, and I think that's really interesting. In terms of interesting people that I've interviewed, I think government officials are incredibly interesting from the city government. I think it was really, for me as a student reporter, when I got to interview students who had gone through kind of traumatic situations. So we had a few instances where there were the students who died on campus. And then I went and found their roommates via social media posts, and I would find a post about this person and see someone commented, oh, I used to live with this person in this dorm, and then I would go and find that person and interview them. And I think just speaking to this person who had gone through this traumatic situation, but who had so much love for their friend, so much love for their roommate, and just hearing about their life, I think that was really interesting to me. Just getting the human aspect of things, where you normally see like student died and that's it, but talking to the people who knew them and finding out more about them, that was really special to me at that time.
So talk to me about working through that, because our students deal with that sometimes as well. A difficulty of having respect for the person, but also doing the job. You want to retell someone's story when they've passed away. How do you deal with that? Compartmentalize all of that as far as, you're doing a service, letting people know who this person is as they passed away, but also you're intruding a little bit, and figuring out when is the right time. Do you want to talk to me or not?
Absolutely, because you have to realize you are intruding. It is a very sensitive time, but you are doing an important job. And so I think I go into it as respectful as I can. I'm like, hi, excuse me. I know this is a difficult time, and my condolences. I'm a reporter. I'd like to talk about this person. I'd like to tell their story. I always try and approach it that way. It's like I'm doing an article about this person, and I need you to talk to me about it. No, I want to tell this person's story. Can you help me do that? And I think that kind of softens the blow a little bit, where this person, they do want to tell that story. They want people to know about this person, their loved one. But I'm always cognizant of the fact that maybe they don't want to talk. And I think, at least for me, I have to be okay with that. Like, if you don't want to talk, if you don't feel comfortable, that's perfectly fine. That's no problem. And I think people respect that, and that might make them more likely to talk to you. But if they don't want to, then you have to be sensitive to people's emotions. You can't be a robot. But when they do allow you to talk to them, I think it's just being very, ginger with your questions, and not being like, so how did they die? Not being so blunt, but being like, can you tell me about this person? What were they like? What did they enjoy? Can you tell me about the day that this happened, that they passed? What happened? And just trying to phrase your questions in a way that are soft and compassionate. I think compassion is really important for this job, to connect with people on a human level, and for them to understand that you want to understand them.
So what's next? What are some of the stories you're working on that you might be able to talk about? Maybe you can't talk about everything, but a little bit about what's going on. What are some of the stories you have on your plate?
Yeah, so in terms of day-to-day stories, I'm covering the city of Hialeah and the city of Hialeah mayor, and right now there's some buzz in the news about whether or not he's leaving the job, so we're looking into that. This Thursday is the City of Miami Commission meeting, so I'll be covering that and some of the stuff that they have on their agenda. But I think I can talk about this, that WLRN is working on a project right now that's due to come out soon, that's sort of celebrating communities that are turning 100 years old. and we're kind of looking into the histories of those cities and connecting with those city communities and the people that live there. And I'm leading that project, so that's going to be coming out in the very near future, and I'm really excited about that.
Is the Freedom Tower part of that?
Freedom Tower is part of that. So Freedom Tower, which Miami-Dade runs, is turning 100 as well, and so we will be covering that as part of our project.
Perfect. All right. So one more question. I'll leave it to you. Anything else you'd like to add to these, to tell these young people about your career, or about college, or about anything? Sure.
So I'll talk a little bit about where I started. I went to Westland Hialeah Senior High. Wasteland. I know it's pretty funny, but I was a dual enrollment student. I grew up in Miami Springs, so go Golden Hawks. I'm glad you guys are here. I think as a student, like when you're in high school, I know it's really you kind of have this image of what you're going to do, like you're going to go to college, and you don't realize maybe how you're going to afford it. And when you kind of get hit with the reality of that, it can be very scary. It was very scary for me. I always assumed I was going to go out of state, and then the reality of how I'm going to pay for college kind of stuck me in my tracks, and I ended up having to go to FIU. And at first, I was kind of like sad about that, and then I realized that my college career and my career in general is what I make of it. And so I made the most out of my time at FIU, and I ended up loving it there. And I think people are going to send you in different directions. People are going to say, you should do this, you should do that, or you can't do this because this is impossible. I think you got to find what you enjoy the most and what makes you happy, and do everything that you can to make that a reality. And it sounds very cheesy, but I think it's true. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't think that you have to do everything on your own. There are so many resources out there for you within your family, within your friends, within your college. MDC has so many resources. So draw on those as much as you can. Take as much advantage as you can. And I think you'll do all right.
Well, thank you, Joshua, for joining us today. Sergio, thank you for making this happen. Ariel, thank you and your team, and for everybody. This has been a great chat. So thank you, guys. I hope you guys have a fun rest of your time here, and have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
I noticed you as an interview were talking in more casual business formats as to refer to the students that are talking here. You were not trying to sound too formal, and you were trying to ease into not only the interviewer, but to the audience that is listening to. And if I were to summarize what you were saying in a couple of sentences, you said that you wanted to ease into any conversation and understand the other person's point of view and who else's point of view that any situation could have happened in. And would you say that the communication skills from you journaling helps in everyday life?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I think it's important when you're interviewing to speak casually. I think you shouldn't have such a high image of yourself, because that comes off as condescending, and that's the last thing you want to do. You want people to be able to relate to you so that they open up to you. But I think doing my job, helping me, I think my everyday life actually helps me in my job. I think in my everyday life, talking to people, being a friendly person, speaking to people on the street, saying hello, saying hi to people in the grocery store, that helps me feel more confident in my job. But then the other way around, I think with my job and what I do covering local government, I know a lot more about what's going on in my community. And then I can bring that home and tell people, like, hey, did you know that this is happening? There's a city hall meeting tonight. They're gonna dig up your whole road. You should probably go there. Or you should know that the Metro Mover is getting extended, so now you can use the Metro Mover or the Metro Rail. But yeah, I think in general, if you're in your everyday life you feel comfortable talking to people, that's going to help you in a whole lot of jobs, and it's going to help you in your life. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So my name is Marie, and I'm from Miami Edison. I was wondering if you ever been sued.
Thank you, Marie. That's a great question. I've been threatened with lawsuits. I have not been sued, but I have had people tell me I'm going to sue you, and that can be scary. But generally, I think your newsroom will be behind you and help you if you're working in a newsroom. I remember when when I was in college, I freelanced for the Miami Times, which is a black-owned newspaper, and I was covering North Miami. And I had written something that was incorrect about someone. I accidentally, the way I wrote it, implicated someone in something that they didn't do, which is a big mistake. And that person said, if you don't correct that right away, I am going to sue you for defamation. And so I immediately called my editor and said, we need to take this down right now. So those situations can be scary. I've also had people say, you're writing this, if you write this story, I'm going to, you need to cease and desist, I'm going to sue you for defamation. But I spoke with my editors and I know, no, this is completely correct. I have all the documents to back this up and I'm not lying. So, and my editor's like, okay, go for it. If they sue us, they sue us. And then we put out the story and then there's no lawsuit happens. So it's something that you have to be prepared for as a journalist, but it's not something you should be super scared about. Just as long as you're careful and you know that you're dotting all your T's, your I's and crossing all your T's, you'll be okay.
Hello, Joshua. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm currently a student at FIU. I'm pursuing a degree in digital journalism, and I have a lot of anxiety. It's been like the major hurdle in me being a journalist. Manolo knows, because I was the reporter.
She's not going to tell you, but she was the editor of our paper last year, right?
Yeah. And so Manolo saw me firsthand, saw the degree of my anxiety. My question to you is, what is the hardest thing that you struggle with as a reporter, if it's just one or a couple, and what do you do to work through that?
Thank you so much, Nicole. I struggle. I have anxiety too. I have a lot of anxiety that I have to deal with, and so part of dealing with that is therapy and going and dealing with myself and centering myself and making sure I'm okay, and prioritizing my own mental health over my job. But I think overcoming that is kind of reminding myself that I can do this job, that I've been doing this job, and you've been doing this job, right? You were the editor of the Reporter. That's a big deal. And just reminding yourself of your ability and the things that you have done and not selling yourself short can help you kind of move forward. I think also sometimes it's hard when I'm thinking about all the things that I need to do and the interviews that I need to do and the stories I need to cover. I get really wrapped up in my head and it kind of balls up in my stomach. So what I have to do is just start. Okay, I'm going to start with one thing, and I'm going to do that thing, and I'm going to finish it, and then I'm going to do the next thing, and then I'm going to finish it and do the next thing. And then eventually, I'm doing all these things, and my anxiety is going away by degrees. And so it's just a matter of doing that and realizing it's going to be okay. It's not the end of the world. You're not terrible at this. You're actually good at this. And that's helped me.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned something about you're the friend who, if something's wrong in an order, you'll complain, right?
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that fighting. I call it fighting spirit. Nicole says it's because people care, right? But talk to me about that's a very important need, essential skill, trait for a reporter to have. How do you turn that off? Because let's say you're at home, it could turn into a fight. You're with your girlfriend, you're with family, you're with whoever, in your normal daily lives. How do you work on turning that off sometimes? Turning
off the wanting to fight everybody and they stand up for what you think is right. Yeah.
It's important. It is important.
Yeah, it's important as a journalist, absolutely, to want to fight for what's right and for wanting to speak up for people who can't speak up for themselves. That's the whole job. Turning it off, I would say I have my work mode and I have my home mode. At work, like you said, fighting spirit, gung ho, trying to do the right thing. When I'm at home, I'm a very non-confrontational person. I don't like to fight. I don't like to argue. So I think it's just being able to do that switch, having that hard line between work and home, and just relaxing and realizing that not everything has to be a big fight. But I think even in my job, I'm not yelling at people. I'm not fighting with people. I'm just trying to understand every viewpoint. So I think it's turning that a little bit differently at home, where it's I'm trying to understand the viewpoint of, like you said, my girlfriend, my brother, my mom, understanding their viewpoint so that I'm not yelling at them or getting angry at them.
I don't necessarily mean you're yelling and berating people, because that's not good either. But I think people don't understand, as a journalist, you need to question things. And that's a constant thing that's probably going on in your mind.
Yeah.
And that doesn't need to be a fight, even with a loved one, but still.
I think, you're right. It is questioning, and sometimes I do that at home, where it's okay, but why did you do this? Okay, but what about that? And trying to lead someone like people can get frustrated with that. Like, stop giving me the third degree. Why are you asking me 20 questions? And just kind of stopping yourself and realizing like, it's fine. I need to chill out. I think it's really a matter of like unplugging and turning off a little bit at home, and maybe having a ritual to stop yourself. Like if it's like listening to music on your way home and just chilling yourself out. I think there just needs to be a divide.
Any other questions? Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you being here today. So, and
Thank you
Joshua,
guys
thank
so
you for
much.
being here.
Yeah, thank you guys.